So this lady came up to me at the bus stop, and then she was like, you shouldn't let that lady get away with that, And I was like, wait, hold on, that happened. So if that lady hadn't come up to me, like with everything else that happens in life sometimes, I'd have just swept it under the carpet and put it down to another experience. But actually, getting her to like champion that and be a voice for me in that situation, or at least letting me see it for what it is, made me feel empowered to actually fight that situation.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Listen In podcast. My name's Aravana.
My name is Anya.
And my name's Boomy.
Let's get into it.
On today's episode, we will be talking about allyship, what it means to us, our experiences, and as always, we'll be sharing tips on what we think can be done within society to promote allyship. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
What does allyship mean to you? Let's start with you, Bumi.
When I think about this word, actually, for me, it's been a voice for maybe the marginalized, identifying discrimination, both overt and covert, in the workplace and just in society in general, and having the confidence and the boldness to actually call it out for what it is, because sometimes a person who's in a situation and going through something, sometimes they find it difficult to identify or know it for what it is. But actually, the more confident we are at understanding inequality and all of that, then we can begin to be a voice for those people and helping them to actually feeling empowered to then also fight for themselves, as well as then being the voice for other people as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you touched on a lot of points there. What about you, Rabna? Any thoughts? What does allyship mean to you?
I think I would say, putting it kind of simply, that it's just being a support for others, I think, and being a fellow human, I would say, that respects others and values others, to be honest, and does what is right and helpful for others.
I really like how you put it, Rabna. I like especially like being a human and respecting other people. That's really important. What about you then, Anya? What does allyship mean to you?
Yeah, I like what both of you have said, actually. And I was reading something about allyship before we met today, and it was talking about people using their position of privilege in order to support those who are being discriminated against in some way. And I thought that's actually quite interesting, because I didn't really see it as people using their position of privilege. I kind of saw it more as Aravna saw it, around just speaking out for what's wrong, and addressing the issue as it comes. But thinking about in terms of using your position of privilege, I think actually, yeah, there are certain people who are in a more privileged, in inverted quotes, position. So actually using that position of privilege and then being able to address and stand up for and speak out on issues is a beneficial thing.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Do you feel like people have to first identify their own privileges to then be able to do that?
I think that that word privilege is always a bit, I think people take it the wrong way, because I think they hear privilege and they think it's to do with monetary situations or having an easy life, and it's not about that. We all have privileges, so being educated is a type of privilege. So the certain amount of education you have is a huge privilege. Your gender can be a privilege. Your race can be a privilege. It's just whatever you have that benefits you in society,
Exactly.
or doesn't hold you back in society, that you're not aware of, that you don't have to think about, is a privilege. Basically.
That's really good, Arabna. Like, I feel like sometimes, even because of the conversations around Black Lives Matter and all of that that's been going on since last year, that actually most of the time these days when people actually hear the word privilege, they don't even think about power, money, they just think white privilege automatically. And I feel like you describing that way makes a lot of sense, because in one way or the other, and I feel like Michelle touched on this again in the interview we had with her, that actually we are all privileged in some way over someone else in society. Like you said, it might even be the level of education that you have, that someone else has not been able to attain for whatever reason. It might be the area of influence, or like the circle of influence that you have. There's always something in a way, and it's about identifying that, because that's, I think when Anya was saying that definition that she found, that's what I was thinking about, that is actually identifying and knowing that in some sort of way, many of us do have some sort of privilege. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I echo what you said as well, Bumi. And I really loved what you said, Arabna, how you touched on so many different areas of privilege, because I don't think that's spoken about much.
No.
So I think I just think it's great that you touched on that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask.
Oh, sorry. No, I just said it because I think a lot of times, like when people hear white privilege, that people are always like, well, I've had a hard life. It's like, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean that you've had a perfect life.
No,
that's not what it's about. It's a completely different definition. I'm going to see if I can actually find the definition quickly.
Whilst you're looking around now, like when I think about white privilege, it makes me think about a video. I think it was a teacher, a sports coach or something at a school in America, and he got all of his students to line up on on a race course, I think, and he started to call out different things. So if you live in a two-parent household, take a step forward. If you're already thinking about going to college and you know that money's not going to be a problem, take a step forward. And I think he called different things that at the end of the day, when a lot of the students and he then said, all of you in front now look behind you, and many of them looked back, and there was a number of the people at the back were most predominantly Black male. And that makes sense, because it's not saying that all of these other children that could take a step forward didn't have other issues going on in their lives. There are things that they would have had to struggle with, but it just means that sometimes society systems have put things in place that makes it easy for some to have a better stepping stone in life than others. But anyway, I really like that, because it explains it in a way that these students, I hope, would have been able to understand. And because they were going to run a race, he then said that, look, I bet you if all of these students at the back were on the same footing as you, they would beat you hands down in this race. But for the fact that you've got a step ahead of them because of all these privileges that you have, in quotation marks, it might be just easier for you to win them. And then it just means that they have to work twice as hard to catch up with you. And for me, that makes a whole lot of sense. It makes it very, very clear to see what that means.
Yeah,
so it's never like a judgment on anyone to say that, well, you've had an easy life. It's not that. Everyone's had a difficult life in one way or the other, but there are certain things in place. Like you said, like we can look at ourselves and look at probably some other people, this country and in other parts of the world, that probably haven't even attained the level of education that we have. And we can say that, and we're not making a boast. Is the fact that, yes, in some way that's probably like put us on a pedestal, that they have to struggle or work twice as hard to get stuff in life just because.
Yeah. I've just found something. So apparently the phrase white privilege was first coined by an activist called Peggy McIntosh, and she described it in terms of the unspoken advantage that the dominant culture has over people of color. So this says, in other words, power, benefits, and other advantages that are distributed in unequal ways amongst different groups in society, specifically with respect to white privileges, the advantages rest with white people. So it has some examples. So for example, probably gonna have to cite this somewhere, sorry. What we've talked about before. So if you're looking for some tights, and you want the color nude, if you're white, in our society, you don't have to think about whether you're going to get your actual color of nude because yours is the standard. That's one, and we've talked, ironically, we've talked about this before.
Exactly.
If you're going shopping and you're looking for cosmetics, which, you know, that has moved forward a little bit, but do you have to think about the fact that they've got your skin tone or not?
You have to spend a bit more to buy two so that you can match them.
Exactly. If you go to lots of stuff about shops, if you go to a shop, do you assume that the employees might be looking at you because they think that you're going to steal something, or because you can't afford it? You know, which, you know, I had a conversation with somebody, I don't know if it was somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but we were talking about the fact that whenever I go shopping, I always get a receipt. Always. Do you guys do that?
Yeah, I still do. And I've been like, it's so interesting you mentioned that. Recently, I've been thinking about, why do I still do this? Like, I don't need all this paper receipt, but I still do because I feel like sometimes the thing's going to go off, the security thing's going to go off when I exit. And I just need something to cover myself for every item that's in my bag, even if I didn't purchase it from that store.
Exactly. That's the other thing as well. I'm always like, I'm going to take a receipt so that if I go in, and because it's happened before where these security guards are just watching you for just no other reason. You know, you come in, they don't look at anyone else, they're just looking at you, they're just following you around the shop, making assumptions and making stereotypes about you. So in order to protect yourself from these things, you do certain things, like always making sure that you have a receipt, you know, things like that. Yeah, those are the main things I do. Even today when I went shopping, I was like, I only bought one thing, should I really take a receipt? I was like, no, I'll take it just in case. So white privilege is not having to think about those things at all, because they will assume that you're not stealing because they don't have that wrong stereotype about you.
Obviously not in all cases, but
of course not. Do you know what, it's really interesting that, because I remember watching a video of a lady, she's Caucasian, and she was, I think it was after the George Floyd incident, and I think she was talking about the fact that people were talking about how he had fake dollars on him, and she was talking about how she went into a store with a fake $20 bill that she'd kept on her fridge from that time, and was innocent, clearly. And she'd gone into a store, she tried to purchase something. I think she got it from a shop or somewhere, as change or whatever it is. But anyway, she tried to purchase something, and the lady said to her, "This is a fake $20 bill." And they're gracious enough to her to not call the police on her, to not do this and to not do that. And I think at the end she was saying about how she thinks about this man and how what happened to him could have happened to me. And also there's a lot of assumptions that are made about some people over some other people just because of how they look, their race or whatever it is, their status in society, whatever it is, that like certain assumptions and judgments that are immediately made about certain people that would not necessarily, like some people wouldn't experience the same.
Okay, so going back to allyship then, have you guys had any personal experiences of allyship at work? So where you might have been in a certain situation and someone else has come and spoken up on your behalf or been supportive in any way?
Like my experience isn't work related, and I think I probably shared a little bit about, I went to a health center to get some bloods done, and anyone who knows me knows that I really don't like getting bloods done because I do not like needles. So I went into this health center, waiting outside with everyone because this happened in COVID. And this lady just came up, and obviously they wouldn't have known that my preferred name was Booming because it's all official, so they had Omobolale on their records. And so I just heard, the lady with the 10:30 or 10:45 appointment. And I was like, she's not talking about me. Please tell me she's not talking about me. Anyway, I went up to the door. I was like, I'm sure I've got the 10:30 appointment. So I went up to the door. She's like, sorry, I can't say your name. I was like, well, on paper, it probably says Omobolale. She was like, yeah. I was like, and you could have tried at least try to say Omo. At least that would have given me a better indication. She was like, yeah, sorry, I can't say it. And she just didn't sound like, oh, I'm really like, do you understand? I understand that there are people in our society that have like probably reading needs and stuff like that, that makes it difficult for them to actually pronounce much more complex words. And that's absolutely fine. But the way she said it, like, yeah, I'm not even going to try with that. Anyway, so apparently people that were waiting outside with me heard it. And I just want, obviously, because I don't like needles, I wanted to get that experience over and done with. So I got my blood, well, in the end, they didn't even do the blood test, because again, that's another issue, that my veins are so tiny, it's a mission to get blood. So coupled with the fact I don't like needles, you can imagine what that must feel like. Anyway, got out, and then I was supposed to wait for a taxi, because that was the plan. But because needles put me into a weird situation, I ended up walking to the bus stop. Why? I don't know. But anyway, so this lady came up to me at the bus stop, and then she was like, you shouldn't let that lady get away with that, And I was like, wait, hold on, that happened. So if that lady hadn't come up to me, like with everything else that happens in life sometimes, I'd have just swept it under the carpet and put it down to another experience. But actually, getting her to like champion that and be a voice for me in that situation, or at least letting me see it for what it is, actually gave me the like made me feel empowered to actually fight that situation. Again, nothing much has come of it, because then I did put in a complaint, and they tried to explain it away, that she called me by my appointment time so she doesn't embarrass me. I was like, how's that less embarrassing than attempting to call my name? But anyway, so yeah, but for me, that was a really good, and it was a recent experience as well, the most recent one that I can think about. So for me, that actually showed me that actually the more people know about the difficulties that probably marginalized people can experience in different areas of life, then obviously the better for our society, actually, because then it makes people better. But that's my most recent experience, I'll say.
And I think it's really interesting that it's after that conversation that you felt empowered to do something about it. And I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
No,
I do
of course
think
not.
for a lot of people from ethnic minority backgrounds, there's certain things that happen to us along the way that we just ignore, and we just get on with. We accept that we feel a way about it when it's happening. We're not happy,
Exactly.
but we just kind of move on. We deal with it. We just kind of carry it with us as we carry on, if that makes sense. I do think sometimes when there's someone else there who's calling it out for what it is, it makes you think, actually, no, this isn't right.
Exactly.
Actually, maybe I should be doing something more about it.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. What about you then, Anya?
Yeah, so for me, I've touched on this already in the episode of Anya's story when I was talking about my experience in my first job. Obviously I went through quite a different experience there, where I was faced with discrimination at work. And I actually had a colleague who, when I was going through the grievance process, a colleague who very bravely decided to speak out and give evidence to support what she had seen in terms of the way in which I'd been treated unfairly in the workplace, and just her experience of working with me. So for me, that was a major thing, and I really valued it, because she didn't have to do that. She didn't have to speak out. She had, these things could have impacted her in some way, but she decided to speak out on something which she felt was true and was right, and she did it of her own will, which again, for me, still surprises me that she just was so bold in doing that. And so, yeah, I think that was definitely one of my experiences of allyship at work. But it did make me think, wow, this, being someone who was experiencing that discrimination, to have someone there supporting you meant so much, so much.
I can imagine.
Because I've mentioned as well in the episode of my story, for a long time, I was feeling like the issue was me, and I was feeling like, I'm doing something wrong, or or there's got to be something wrong with me if I'm the only one being treated this way at work. But actually having someone come alongside me and say, look, I can see what's happening. It's racism, calling it out for what it is. It really did help to empower me and make me see things a bit more objectively. So yeah, that was definitely important for me.
Yeah, and I guess that's what this whole allyship thing is about, that actually it empowers people, because especially when you're going through stuff, I mean, it's all well and good talking to your family members about it and they can see it for what it is, but within that workplace, if you don't have someone standing with you, it makes it really difficult to talk about it. Or in that situation, like my situation was outside of work, but like if you're in that situation and there's no one standing with you, then it makes it really difficult. If that lady hadn't come to me and I talked to my husband, like, I'm not, like, my husband is very supportive of me. He would have probably like said, oh, that's not okay, but he experiences it as well, and would have probably both like just swept it under the carpet. And this is why allyship is very important. And we're not saying that, well, at least I'm not saying that only people of a certain race or of a certain color owe the duty to the rest of the world to be allies. We all owe a duty to each other, if that makes sense. But if there's in a lot of ways that I'm being discriminated against, it kind of pulls a wall over my eyes that sometimes I'm unable to see the prejudice and the injustices that some other people may experience. So the more I feel empowered to talk about my battles by someone else seeing it, and then the more that those things are addressed, then I can support other people as well. Because I feel like sometimes when you're going through stuff, it's so much more harder to see clearly what's going on with other people, because you can be a bit more focused on me while I'm going through this struggle as well. And sometimes you can't even see it because you're going through your own struggles. But the more things are being addressed and the weight falls off your shoulder, then you can begin to then actually see more things. And the more you see how organizations and people and systems and all of this respond to those claims, it actually makes it easier to call things out. So I know it feels like I've moved on to a whole other thing, but as you know very well, like, I just get thoughts in my head and I got to say them.
Yeah, and I think even if, like, linked to what you're saying, even if, because I think there's a level of the way I'm interpreting what you're saying is that sometimes these things are so normalized or just accepted as just a fact of life. But even if you do realize that something wrong has happened, there's also the issue of power. So you might not have the power to do anything about it.
Exactly.
So if somebody's in a position of power, whether it's their status of privilege or their actual level of seniority in the organization, that's also helpful. So if there's somebody more senior that decides to speak up about something, that's also really helpful.
Yes,
and can help
definitely.
with different situations and actually get things moving, because I always think that the systems are really important. So it's all well and good everybody who's newly qualified or not as senior trying to do all these things. That's really good, but you also need people who are more senior and more at the top of the organization and doing something or making moves as well.
Yeah,
that's a very good point. And we've spoken about our experiences where others has been allies for us, but have we been allies for anyone else? Now, it doesn't have to be specific to race, but it could be due to anything. Have we been, have either of you two been allies to other people?
I think I try to be as much as I can. I don't know if it's necessarily that that I was aware of. I just think that there's certain things. Sometimes you don't realize that people are going through certain difficulties, or that they may be in an underprivileged group or whatever it is. But I think I try. I'm not going to say that I always do, because I don't know, but I do try to support. And I think it's even little things like in terms of listening to people from those groups. So for example, if we talk about as an example, disability rights, actually listening to people who are maybe disabled or, you know, are in that community and what they're saying that the problem is, and then changing your behavior. So maybe even the way that you talk about people, the way that you describe people, if people from a certain group have said, actually, this is offensive to us, we don't like being called whatever the word is, actually taking that on and changing that behavior. I think that that's the sort of stuff that I can kind of think of offhead that I've personally been doing, and what I think is one thing that's helpful to you know, being an ally for other people.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Annie, actually, because whilst we're talking about being allies, I remember I made a comment about we all need to be allies for other people. And that's a point that actually I then started to think, in what way have I been, but didn't have enough time to really think about a clear example. But I think what Arabna says makes sense, because I do know clearly that there are times that I've read like pieces of research or like surveys carried out like on marginalized people, like whether like through disability or whatever it is, that just reading like a bit more research, again, thinking about how they would like to be addressed was important to them and all of that. And obviously empowering or championing that in whatever way possible. Then yes, I've definitely done that. But also, like, whilst I was also thinking about it, I was like, I also don't feel like, and this is why I agree with the Robin on the point of people in power being able to make the change. That is all well and good, me wanting to champion something, but especially within my role at work, that there, yes, I can call certain things out. I can feed it on to like maybe someone else if I really notice something, but there's a limit to my power, if that makes sense. That actually then, yes, I can do some of this stuff, but there are people way at the top that can make more change. And hopefully if I do get, and when I do get to that position, then hopefully I'll continue to be a voice, and then I'll use my sphere of influence as well to make the change that I want to see. But yeah, I do agree that sometimes power can be a limiting thing to how you can affect the change that you really want to see, or how you can really champion all these causes.
Yeah, I think there's power in numbers, definitely, but I also do think that that sort of
there's
people with the, you know, power and privilege. So those people with the privilege of being a senior, you know, being involved somehow, and supporting those who are maybe more doing the sort of groundwork, or the whatever you call it, level work. But yeah, I think it's really important.
Yes, definitely.
And I think it's good to reflect on these things and think about, you know, how have we been allies, or how can we be better allies as well. And, you know, I was, even though I asked the question, I was trying to think of my own experience. And I was thinking about just sometimes a few occasions when I was at school, and a couple of situations happened with some of my friends, and I remember just really advocating for them, you know, really speaking out on their behalf. In fact, teachers got me in trouble, I'm not going to lie.
Usually the way, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately, but I remember being very passionate about it and really speaking out about it then. So yeah.
But just to kind of like just taking from what you said then, Anya, that actually, because I've always thought about the fact that sometimes what makes people stop to talk about these things is the fear of being, the fear of the impact that would have on them as well. So it might be that for some people, they've enjoyed certain privileges or certain peace by just being quiet about these things. And then suddenly it's like, well, if I talk about it, that's going to happen, that's going to happen. I might begin to suffer from it as well. So that I think it's great to acknowledge that. But that's, I think I've said this before in one of our episodes, that actually sometimes what makes it easier to lend your voice, to champion a cause, is knowing how it will be responded to. But also it shouldn't be an excuse, and we shouldn't allow that stop us from being a voice, because you just don't know what you are doing for that person or for people actually. And yeah, and hopefully there would be a voice for you as well in a time when you need it.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you on that as well. Okay. So let's think about what can people do to champion change. So it is, as you said, for me, it can be quite a bold step. That, you know, it is uncomfortable having to speak up on these things. But I think I've always seen it as thinking of the long-term impact, or the bigger impact of addressing this issue, and how it can support other people in the future. So it's not just it's not just specific to this isolated incident. Often it can be beneficial a bit more long term. So that's where I always see it. But what can people do to champion change?
I think it's a hard one, but I think just little things help. Even things like having spaces to, like having an environment where people can actually bring concerns or talk about concerns is a big step, because then it would make it easier to for people to say things that are happening, or report things that are happening, or to defend someone, or speak up for someone if something happens. I think, yeah, the environment is really important.
I completely agree with that. And I'd say, you know, having a safe space, because it has to be a safe space, and people need to feel that if they do bring it up, that there won't be any, you know, consequence, like, you know, really bad consequences for reporting it. It needs to be a safe space to be honest and real about what's going on. So I think if people can create that space within their organization, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I think I was sharing with you guys something I read from the Harvard Business Review website, and I was talking about how leaders from majority groups have helped preserve the status quo, which favors them by relegating diversity, equity, and inclusion's efforts to human resources instead of using their own power to effect change. And I think this ties really well again into what Arabna said previously about how there is power in number, but there's also power in power, to keep it simple, that actually sometimes it feels like these roles are being left in the hands of not the wrong people, but people that are still subject to a higher force, if that makes sense. There are people above them that can actually effect this change.
Also, in terms of what you were saying, Anya, a lot of times in quite a few workplaces, sometimes they do have people that you can talk to anonymously if you are like, if you've noticed something and you want to speak out about it, but you don't feel confident, or you don't feel like you're in a team where you can do that. There tends to be some sort of group that can help you with that as well. So kind of trying to find out who those people are and going to them as well.
Definitely. And I'll say a lot of trusts have an actual ethnic minority group, or some sort of group where they are supporting those marginalized or those, you know, typically marginalized groups. So I think, as Arabna said, it's important to be aware of those within your organizations, and be aware of who you can contact to seek advice. I haven't actually mentioned this, but obviously my role is the Ethnic Minority Network Ambassador. So as part of that role, it means that if anyone does have concerns around, you know, being racially discriminated against, or any issues around being an ethnic minority, that they can come to me as a first point of call, and raise those issues. And then once they've raised it with me, I can then support them to escalate on their behalf. So again, you know, being aware of who is available in your organization. I'm not the only one in my organization, by the way. There's a team of us in my borough, so that's also helpful. We're dotted around. But just being aware of who's there is what I'd say. Just
and if they don't have that organization or that sort of group, then maybe seeing if that group can be created as well, talking to people.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, because sometimes it's just that, you know, nobody's done it before, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done.
Can't be done.
You know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it was only recently I found out about the inclusions network we have at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was having a conversation with the chair, and she was just talking about how she just joined she joined the team, and one day in a conversation she was like, there isn't an inclusions network. And
Mm.
actually made me think, well, I'd never even looked into this sort of stuff. So
Mm.
it just like, I think it's really good to have these conversations because it makes you challenge yourself as well, that what, like, could I have been a voice towards this? Could it have happened any sooner than just happening like within the last year or so? So I think it's really, really important to see how you can come in as well, or at least knowing what's out there and what's already available so you can be a part of it in whatever way possible. Yeah, that's really important. It also feels like sometimes in people trying to um, know how they can be better allies, they also put a responsibility on the marginalized person to come and tell them about what they can do. There's a lot of information out there. Educate yourself. Like just like we were giving examples, and I'm not saying that we're better than anyone. Please, I hope I'm not misunderstood. Like in terms of like going out to read that piece of research, finding out
Mm.
what the more acceptable term is, knowing how people feel about certain stuff, and actually taking it on board. There is a lot of information out there. Yes, you can listen to people, you can ask them, but it's also about how you ask and what you then do with that information once you have it. Because it's all well and good saying, well, 30% um, of our BAME workforce feel this certain way. But what are you going to do to then change that narrative so that they stop feeling that way? What can you do to make it better? Those are some of my
Mm.
thoughts on it, because I feel like, yes, I agree with you on that front, Arabna, a lot, that yes, it's one thing that we want people to change. That's great. But if systems do change, it makes for a better society overall, better working environment, better everything anyway. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that one as well. Um, and I think, kind of following on from what you're saying, it is important for people to seek information, so to learn about different cultures. But I think it's recognizing that learning is a ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
And, we touched on it in an earlier episode around, the fact that just because you are African, for example, or from Nigeria, doesn't mean you can relate to every single tribe in Nigeria, or does it mean
Mm-hmm.
that you can then relate to every country in Africa, or even every country in West Africa? Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I think it's recognizing that as an ally as well, that there will be differences within cultures,
Mm-hmm. Of
and
course.
seeking to learn about it, but seeing learning as an ongoing process.
It is,
So
yes.
something that you need to actively be seeking out and trying to learn about. And
Mm.
also, I just want to add, an, an ally could, I think, what could be good for an ally to do to promote change, is to start calling out things as
Mm-hmm.
well as they occur. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess it goes back to what that definition was at the beginning around using your position of privilege. So if it's white privilege, if it's privilege because of your skin color,
Mm.
then calling out what you can see amongst other white colleagues or friends or
Mm-hmm.
family who might say something, or might say something where they haven't fully um, maybe taken into consideration what they've said could be, offensive, or
Mm-hmm.
but being able to call it out and say, actually, I don't think we should say it like that, because this could mean this. And it doesn't have to be just white, it could be any culture or anything, any discrimination,
Yeah.
just um being able to address it
Mm-hmm.
in your everyday conversations, making it a normal thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think often what happens is that people can come to work and say, nope, we're not tolerating this. And when they're at home behind closed doors with their family or their friends, then it just
Mm.
comes out. So I
Mm.
think just
Exactly.
generally, all of us need to be a lot better at calling it out as it happens.
Exactly.
And it's not easy, because you do run a risk of changing your relationships a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about the
Yes,
impact that this can have on future generations to
of
come as
course.
well. So I think it's really important to start having those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like having this conversation has actually challenged me as well to think more about how I'm being an ally for people all
Mm.
around me, whether like in workplace and just all around me in general. Um, so it's really definitely an important conversation to have. And like you said, the education never ends. We have to continue to challenge ourselves. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, I don't think we can afford to be quiet anymore about these things, because otherwise our society is not going to be any better than it was 10, 20 years ago if we carry on with the same system. So that's really, really important to begin to, yeah, no, it's definitely challenged my thoughts, to be honest. And I'll go away and have a good, long, hard think about my allyship as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep bringing it back to this, but I think about, my experience in my first job and how damaging that was, and the long-term kind of impact it had
Mm-hmm.
on just, not just kind of, I guess, my emotional state like during that time, but I guess also thinking about how I viewed myself and things like that. So, thinking about the long-term impact that some of these racial experiences can have, racial discrimination experiences can have, I think it is so important to really speak out on it and, really address it at the time, because, you don't realize what this type of or these type of situations can have on people. You don't know, you don't really the kind of long-term impact and implications it can have on someone. So it's good to address it at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would say as well, just to add another tip, or of something that people can do, is if you've witnessed something and you don't feel necessarily that you can address it at the time, write it down. I'd say keep a bit of a record of what you've observed. So writing it down is really important, because and then writing it down factually, what you've observed, what you've seen, what you've heard, not making it too much about how you felt in that situation, but making it very factual about what has been observed. And then by having a record, you can then address it with the right people and say, look, this is what I've observed over this period of time. Obviously, I'm not saying don't speak to your direct line manager, I'm not saying don't do all of that, but I'm saying it is helpful as well to write it down, because sometimes what can happen is that if you are in a position where you're having to explain what you've observed, it's hard to recall everything at once. And sometimes having a specific time frame and very clear events of things that have occurred can be helpful in terms of expressing what you've observed and being an ally in that situation. On today's episode, we spoke about allyship. We discussed the different definitions of what an ally is and how being an ally can be hugely positive for people from a varied background. We then had a really interesting discussion about times when we have been in positions of privilege and used our own position of privilege to be an ally for others. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. And follow us on social media for updates. Until next time, bye.